West Sacramento City Council and Redevelopment Successor Agency and Financing Authority. We're going to begin tonight as we do each week with the Pledge of Allegiance. So we'd like to invite our guests to join the council and staff in the pledge, which tonight will be led by Mayor Pro Tem Absent D.
Ready? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Let me note we are experiencing some technical difficulties with our audio-visual system in the chambers this evening, so that we have mostly working microphones, and we have some working microphones that are for our broadcast system. So there will be some portions of the meeting that will be difficult to hear from the in-person audience, and other portions of the meeting that will be difficult to hear from at home. But we're making do the best that we can in order to make sure that everyone gets a chance to be heard. But if you are really struggling to hear what's being presented in the meeting, please let us know somehow, or let the clerk know, and we'll remind folks to speak up at the podium for witnesses. The council did meet in closed session this evening to confer with our real property negotiator regarding three properties. One, the Indian Heritage Center property; second, 826 West Capitol Avenue; and third, 815, 824, and 826 West Capitol Avenue, as noted in our agenda. Also to confer with our legal counsel regarding two matters of exposure to litigation. No action was taken on those or on the real property items. And to approve one matter for initiation or intervention in a legal action, and no action was taken on that one either. So with that, we're going to proceed to item 1A on our agenda. Item 1A is presentation by the public on matters not on the agenda, but within the jurisdiction of the City Council. As is noted on our agenda, we're prevented by state law from having a discussion about any items that are brought up under item 1A, but it is an important opportunity for a public forum. We do ask that anyone wishing to address the council on this item or any other item this evening to please fill out one of the yellow cards that are available near the front door and turn the card into the city clerk. In front of the clerk is a timer that indicates how much time the speaker has been speaking. We ask that all testimony be limited to no more than 3 minutes so that everyone gets a chance to be heard. Also in front of the clerk is an analog flip chart, and that simply indicates which item the council is currently considering on the agenda. We take the yellow cards all the way up to the conclusion of the staff report on an agenda item. Once the staff report is complete and the council questions and public testimony has begun, we don't take any additional speaking requests. So if you look ahead at the agenda and want to turn your request in as soon as you can, but certainly by the conclusion of the staff report. We recognize also that for a lot of folks speaking in public, even if there's no microphone, can cause some anxiety. So we do ask that there not be any boos or catcalls, or actually even any applause or other demonstrations, and that we try to maintain a civil discourse here in the chambers. So with that, we have no, what did she just hand me? Oh, put it in the wrong place. We do have one request to speak under item 1A. That's by Maria Grijalva.
Greetings, council members. Did you say it's broken?
I think, if I remember correctly, this one will be it's audible at home, but the microphone here is cannot be heard in the room, and so the extent to which you can speak up.
The good thing is that I have a loud voice naturally. Good evening, council members. My name is Maria Grijalva, and this is give your name?
Regina Martinez.
And I'm here to request on behalf of her and other residents of West Sacramento that the gang injunction that we have be ceased and terminated, because it's actually bad, because the city is gaining financially because it receives extra money, and so there's this gang unit that has nothing to do but harass young people, and she lives in what area?
In Broderick.
In Broderick, and so she has a 15-year-old that was charged for robbery. They're trying to add a gang something injunction on it, or I don't know exactly the exact term at this moment, but anyway, it's being used in a very negative way. They're trying to do 2 life sentences. The police report and the witnesses report said the same thing. When it came back from the detectives, it was completely different. The incident had completely changed. And so you need to be aware of this because this is impacting the, well, actually 16-year-old. And while she was talking to me, she received the phone call because I believe he's incarcerated. How much is the fine?
The bail is 2.5 million.
Yeah, and so we can't wait 2 years. There's a lot of financial gain, and there's lives, personal lives being destroyed because of this. And I think that's it in a nutshell. That the gang injunction is wrong. We have teenagers that get in trouble. That's true, but they're not like lifetime criminals that have been doing harm and harming animals and doing vandalism since they started to walk. Okay, there's no history, there's no reason for 2 life sentences.
Let the punishment fit the crime. That's not happening.
Yeah, in fact, there's a whole minute left if you'd like to share it with them. It's okay, just share, tell them how you feel.
Yeah, it's, I'm not just saying that they're targeting my son. I'm not saying that, he's, innocent. Let the punishment fit the crime. We need more, we need more mothers and families in the community to come together to make a difference in the community. In whatever way we can. We don't see any kind of positive, anything in this community to keep these boys off the streets and being targeted. I'm not saying they're just targeted.
Instead of using that gang money, they should use it to mentorship.
Yes.
Okay, and go out into the community and mentor those kids instead of paying the salary for the gang unit. The gang unit should be out there being mentors and role models to these kids.
Yes, we have none.
I think that's
we have
it.
a community with mothers and fathers.
Yeah. We just have a couple. Thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, that is our only request under item 1A. I would, we haven't had an update on the injunction in some time. So I'd ask the city manager just to provide the council with that update. The council has no role to play in individual cases. The city council does not review police reports or charges or that sort of thing. So the specific case is not within the council's jurisdiction or purview. But if you can give us an update on the status of the injunction, I think the council would appreciate that. Okay, item 1B is council communications. Are there any reports or other communications this evening? Mr. Johannesson?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The Housing Development Corporation met on March 17th, and there was voting on a few action items, notably the funding some of the capital expenditures for the properties. We also discussed the strategic plan that we're developing from the meeting a couple months ago. And then on March 29th, the Policy Steering Committee of the Streetcar met. And so we went over the new funding requests, and apparently there's been a new cap and trade grant application that's gone out, which basically focused around, it was the interconnection with the railroads, I think was the biggest, the most significant cost. And the cost now is around $195 million. Now the project also includes, my understanding is north-south section 2 in West Sacramento. Still the time for actual deployment is 2020, but we're now actually looking at the procurement of the vehicles and what the vehicles would look like in terms of size, what kind of windowing they have, the length of them, and the design also, whether it's 100% low floor or not. And so we should, in the next couple of months, start getting more detail on the specifications of the cars themselves.
Okay. Mr. Kristoff.
Yeah, a couple, Mr. Mayor. Westside Staff met last month, March 10th, and the major items that were discussed were work on Village Parkway, continued to Gregory Road. Paving starts in April. I don't know if they've started yet, but it should happen soon. There have been some weather delays, and so that has delayed it until April. The chief report will be executed in mid-April, and that is extremely important. That one really ties in with the GRR, and that's the general evaluation report. And the reason that those two are so important is because That is the first step in putting the city of West Sacramento on a WERDA bill. And that in turn gives the federal government some authority to invest in West Sacramento for levee protection. And it is extremely important. This is one of the real critical steps that has to be met. And I know that our staff has been working very hard, and I know when we go back on cap to cap a little later on, this is going to be an issue. But we have done extremely well with Christopher and with other people that are on the water projects, that making sure that the politicals back in Washington, D.C. fully understand all of the importance that is going on and all of the work that we have done already, and starting to get reimbursement and reimbursement for those federal funds. Let's see, one other one was regional sand. We had a meeting last week, 2 weeks ago, and there's one major issue that surfaced, and it was a bid dispute. The bid is a $500 million bid. So needless to say, there are a lot of big companies that are really sharpening their pencils and crossing their T's and dotting their I's. And there is a dispute that is going on now between three different firms, and we are trying to sort all of that out. We had some discussion on it during the meeting, and we did not get everything resolved. So we will get everything resolved this coming meeting for, I think it's the 24th or something like that. But we will get all that straightened out. But there's so much money involved that people, big business especially, they're really nitpicking all the bids and nitpicking everything, and which is fine. I mean, they have every right to do that, and we have every right to make sure we scrutinize those bids and make sure that everything is on the up and up.
Terrific. Just on the flood piece, I very much appreciate the comments about the work that the whole advocacy team's been doing in DC. But we could not be successful on the DC side with the Army Corps and with Congress and the White House if we didn't have a solid flood plan and solid delivery and administration on the ground here in the city. So and support by the voters for all the financing. So I want to acknowledge the whole team, including Mr. Christoph and West Africa and our own flood shop and all the city departments that have been involved, because we've had the right. We're selling a good product in DC. It stands out there because when they agree to let us try something, we deliver on it. We keep our commitments, and we've made a very strong analytics and analysis at each stage. So it's been a very powerful team effort. I think we're all not surprised at how much incredible progress we've made to stay on schedule on the most complex, most expensive thing that we've ever undertaken as a city. But it's still pretty remarkable. So thanks, Mr. Christoph. Mr. Ledesma.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Before we begin, Councilmember Johannesson, did you? I'm sorry, I may have missed it. Did you give an update on streetcar? You did, right? Thank you. I apologize about that. But on the 28th, on behalf of, I attended the Yolo County Transit District put on an open house for around proposed changes along the bus route. I think the council may remember that last meeting. The district is looking at streamlining some routes and looking at routes along the Southport area. Seeing the Six is here, she's been an advocate around that area. But I attended that meeting on the 28th. There's another one this past Monday. So I want to make sure folks know there's another one coming up on the 18th of April. And then the Yolo County Transit is meeting on the 11th, so more opportunities to provide feedback to those routes. It is important we do get feedback as we propose route changes, and we're looking at other transit options in Southport as a way to continue to look at ways of innovating the transit system and making sure we have better on-time performance. So again, this meeting's coming up on the 18th of April. Also, on the 31st of March, I attended SEDCOG Transportation Committee's alternate Mr. Baldwin. On that agenda were a few things of interest. One is we approved the program, the Transit Asset Management Plan. That was evolved through that committee. We also got passed through 2 actions regarding the bike share program. I want to thank America Baldwin, who has been part of that steering committee on bike share, another part of transit that will be important to the region, to West Sac. And also we got some updates on other, the Transportation Demand Management Strategic Plan that's coming up, where we'll have interest enough. I asked staff to follow up, get more information on some of the things that are being talked about at the SACOG level that we might be able to incorporate back here in West Sacramento, as well as the other transit. But that's all the updates I have today. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ledesma. Mayor Pro Tem Sandine.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The Port Commission met earlier tonight, and we received an update on the Yolo County Rail relocation project and planning, and we supported continued involvement of the port staff in planning discussions. And then on Monday of this week, the City School 2 bikes took place, and we discussed public utilization and access to the former River City High School site. And we learned the facility can be rented for things such as soccer tournaments. The tennis courts have been deactivated, as a focus at this time is on K-8 programs. And we also heard about the Learning LRNG funding for badging, and I am going to imagine, Mayor, that you may want to share more about that. Thanks.
Perfect. Thanks. I have a couple of reports. A couple of weeks ago during the South by Southwest Innovation Festival, and it's a music festival as well, but there's South by Southwest Interactive. It's one of the primary innovation and technology events in the country in Austin, Texas. That occurred middle of last month. And we were invited to participate in as part of a delegation of, I think, 12 mayors from around the country, partly because of our work on Code for America, but also on a suite of other initiatives. So I made some presentations about some of our work on innovation and on workforce development and education in particular. And then also had the opportunity to meet with Google Fiber about infrastructure and potential opportunities here. I got to ride in one of the Google autonomous vehicles, which was a fascinating experience, but also to hear from some of the other cities where the pilot's underway around the significant land use opportunities, the safety opportunities, the parking. I mean, there's a whole range of policy issues, which we actually talked about in the charter conversation around innovation and around transportation as well. But it was you know, within moments of getting into the car, you enter the car worried that is it going to be safe, and 5-10 minutes into it, you're not worried about that anymore. Now you're worried about all the other cars that are around you that aren't being driven by this autonomous system. It was a really interesting technology and system, and we certainly got some good test cases with trees and animals and baby strollers falling into the street in front of us. So interesting, but there's certainly some implications for our policy work on transportation planning and land use planning. Google, Alphabet, which is Google's parent company, presented to us on a police body camera alternative that they are working on. That makes use essentially of the Android phone technology. An Android phone costs dramatically less than a police body camera, and than those that are on the market, but has far more capabilities in terms of its ability to detect if you fall in. Communication technology. It has. I mean, those devices which we all use every day have many more capabilities that could be used as a less expensive version of a body camera. So they were demoing some of the pilots that they were undertaking as an early stage technology in that space. And we also judged a competition of city-oriented startups that are developing technologies that would be useful to cities in particular, including one about procurement, which we were already aware of because of our participation in Code for America, but that allows for cities to understand, to see more clearly what the market is. So we have one city in a region who's procuring a printer, an HP model printer for $200. This system allows you to see, well, what is everybody else paying? Because we all report this, right? It's public information when we procure a piece of equipment or something through that process. So their startup is focused on aggregating that information in ways that cities can then use to say, okay, I'm paying twice as much for the same printer as everyone else. Maybe I could leverage a better deal, but to drive down the cost of procurement. A second was on payment systems. Cities and transit districts and others are pretty piss poor with respect to alternatives for payment, Apple Pay and other things, but what other modes of payment could be used? There's a startup that's focused on that as well, which was second place in the competition. And then a third that was on fingerprinting technology for both things like preschool, but also for Uber and Lyft regulations, as an example of something that many cities have been contemplating regulations with respect to Uber and Lyft that would require fingerprinting every driver. That's an expensive and time-consuming and bureaucratic proposition. Austin commissioned a startup to develop the technology and to allow to be able to use a smartphone to be able to do legally binding fingerprinting, interacting with the state's fingerprint systems. So some interesting initiatives out of that process for us to learn about, but also just the key value to having West Sacramento in that, being sort of prominently displayed around the country as a place where innovation can happen. It's been a key part of our economic development strategy, so it was a great opportunity. Also at South by Southwest, though, LRNG, the outfit that Mayor Pro Tem Sandin referenced, announced at the plenary session that 8 new cities were joining the cities of LA, Chicago, Dallas, and Washington, D.C. as part of the Cities of Learning initiative, which I think I mentioned briefly to council once before. So they announced that those 5 cities would be joined by a new cohort of 8 that were working on digital badging as a strategy for dramatically improving the life outcomes and education and workforce development opportunities for young people in cities around the country. And those 8 cities include Kansas City, Rochester, Philadelphia, Columbus, Ohio, San Jose, San Diego, and West Sacramento. We're by far the smallest city in the cohort. But the assistant city manager Amanda Berlin has been the lead on this project, along with my deputy Ian Winbrock, and they've done tremendous work on it. They really had to overcome a lot of bias against small cities in the LRNG community, but LRNG, to their credit, was willing to take a chance on a small town to be able to demonstrate that you don't have to be a giant city in order to do right by young people and to use the technology to improve their chances. So we'll be coming to council with a full presentation, I think, relatively soon. But there are some key deliverables that are on the way. One of our first opportunities for that LRNG work is with the JUMA partnership with the arena. Starting in the fall, where we're looking to place West Sacramento youth, both in high school and opportunity youth, that is young people who have dropped out of the system entirely, but to be able to place them in paid jobs at the arena as part of a mentored and curated workforce development opportunity connected to their education and to their learning. So we've been selected by the Kings as one of, I think, five intermediaries around the region for that purpose, and we'll be using the LRNG digital badging system to ensure that a student who completes that JUMA experience at the arena and gets the paid experience also gets recognition that is then can be validated and seen by employers and colleges for future opportunities for those young people. So it'll be a good first level experiment of how the LRNG system will work. So after South by Southwest, I was at the White House for the White House convened a dozen community college presidents and other leaders in California around the California the college promise that the president's proposed, and the council knows I'm on the national board for that project. So we met at the White House to figure out what opportunities are there in California. The city of Oakland and the city of Richmond have recently announced full-blown college promise programs, and the state of California is considering a piece of legislation as well. So some interesting ideas that we might consider here in the city to advance that concept as well. Mr. Ledesma already reported on the SACOG, the Transportation Committee items. We also, at the SACOG board, approved the new guidelines for the the active transportation program, which has been a source of funding for us for biking and walking programs. And those criteria have been tuned yet again, but the tunings are mostly to our benefit in terms of disadvantaged communities in our city and around the region. The bike share items that came out of our steering committee and were approved by the SACOG Transportation Committee will result in the release of an RFP for a bike share operator later at the end of this year, with the expectation that we'll be able to have bikes on the street in 2017. So that's significant progress as well. And then finally, in San Diego earlier this week, was asked to present the work that we're doing here in the city as part of the region to the California Workforce Association, which is interested in how workforce development can work, period, or work better on a regional scale. But they've been struggling about how to make that work, and we have too. We're a part of the YOLO Workforce Development Board, even though most of our residents work either in West Sacramento or in Sacramento, and most of our companies are recruiting from Sacramento. So a more regional approach to workforce development systems. They'd asked me to come and give a presentation about how we have approached regionalism in a way that that a city like ours can benefit from regionalism, while still maintaining our soul and our own core interests. So it's positive. So it's been a high-profile couple of weeks for our city. So, all right, there's no other reports, appointments to boards and commissions. We have none this evening, but we'll be doing the Port Commission appointment. We'll be doing it in the next council meeting. That brings us to presentations. Item 2 is presentation of the 2016 Summer Steps Internship Program. Ms. Miller is going to be presenting that.
Good evening, City Council. I'm Miller from the Human Resources Division here with the city. I'm here to give a presentation on the Summer Steps Internship Program that will take place this summer for 2016. I'd like to briefly talk about the successes that we had with our 2015 program. Last summer was the first program that we implemented. Summer Steps stands for Strides Towards Entering Public Service. It's an opportunity for youth in our community to kind of figure out a way of how to join public service and also the opportunities that we can offer them. Last year when we ran our recruitment, we had over 400 applicants for our 7 departments. Many of our departments had more than one intern, and so we had a couple opportunities for them, so that's why we had many applicants. We ended up hiring 24 interns for our 8-week program, and we're looking to replicate that success this year. We will open the recruitment shortly after we receive further direction from you guys, and our recruitment will be open for 3 weeks until we receive 75 applications for either department or division. Priority will be given to West Sacramento Unified School District students who are enrolled in a career-driven pathway or academy, and then we'll also give secondary preference to other graduates, West Sacramento residents, and other West Sacramento Unified students. We'll advertise with the various local high schools, community colleges, and universities, and again, we will do the same 2 interns per department. Since our city has grown, we have added a new department, so we will have more interns this year. And the departments do have the choice of recruiting for more than 2 interns. It would be at their discretion and also at their cost. The program will again run for 8 weeks. We plan to start it June 13th and it'll run through August 5th. We will hold weekly informational luncheons with the interns. It's something we did last year and we got really valuable feedback that it was something that was very beneficial to the city. Mr. Mayor presented last year, and we also had other city officials, and they discussed their steps that they took towards entering public service and kind of their career path that they had. We will work with the mayor's assistant to coordinate the Summer Steps program with the LRNG digital badging program as well. And the interns will receive informal evaluations throughout the week to discuss their progress that they're making in the internship. And then at the end of the 8 weeks, they will receive a formal evaluation. It's signed off by the department head, and it's something that they can take with them for future career opportunities and interviews with them. Thank you.
Any questions? Yeah, it's been fantastic. I just want to really acknowledge Caitlin and Phil Wright, her the assistant city manager that's been leading this work, but Caitlin's been doing an outstanding job. City manager had this concept, I think, in consultation with Mr. Wright, and they wanted to do a first-class program, and right out of the gate, this Summer Steps was it was probably best in class in the region from day one, and both because of the vision and the amount of commitment that the city manager and the leadership put in place, and then because Caitlin actually went and implemented the thing. So it's been really great work, and I know many of the council members have spent time with at least one or more of the interns, and we've seen what the kind of impact that it's had on their career readiness, their skills, their aspirations, and their potential. So it's been fantastic. All right, thanks.
Thank you.
All right, so item 3 is a presentation on the Week of the Young Child from April 10th to the 16th.
Good evening. Hello, council members and mayor. I'm Justine Jimenez. I'm the Director of Early Learning Services for our city, and you all may be aware that next week, kicking off National Week of the Young Child. And so I just wanted to take this opportunity to thank the council for the great work that we've done in the city of West Sacramento to improve the lives of families and children by enhancing the quality of preschool and childcare that we have in the city. During the Week of the Young Child, we really encourage you all to think about the people in your life that you know that have childcare, that really quality childcare is what keeps West Sacramento and really the world working, because unless we have a safe and quality place to bring our children, we don't go to work. So with that, we have a message from the Learning Ladder children for you for Week of the Young Child. I think.
Does he work in West Sacramento? He works in the city of West Sacramento? Awesome. What does he do? He works, yes. Olivia, where is your mama right now? She's working? Housekeeping? What do you do in housekeeping? Play. What's your name, Nico? Can you look at me real quick? What do you like the best about being in preschool? Circle. At Circle? Can you say that again? At Circle. What do you do at Circle? Listen. Oh, that's good. How many children? Circle time. Third? Activities. What do you think, Sophia? How do you feel? Oh, how about you, Daniel?
Like to be listening and play and giving my different thoughts.
Can you reason? Field trips? What else do you like to do? Play outside. Where's your mommy and daddy right now? At work, huh? Shane, what are you doing down there? I can't hear you. Look at me and tell me what you're doing. I can't hear you, baby. Look at my face. What are you doing? You are?
I don't know why it's doing that, but yeah, I hope you guys could hear that, but that's all. Thank you so much, and just wanted to bring that awareness. So.
Thank you, Justine.
Thanks for sharing that, Ms. Jimenez. I actually had a chance today to speak at the Mile Preschool and in Southport, and got to spend time and share my experiences serving on the city council. And we also reviewed the Delta and Dawn story. So it was a really great experience, and I look forward to celebrating. I guess it would be next week.
Next week, yeah.
Continuing to celebrate.
All right. Deltoned on the whales, not the...
Yes, Deltoned on the whales, not the storms.
All right, terrific. Thank you. Thanks, Justine. All right, that brings us into item 4, which is a summary of the discussions to date and request for direction on potential municipal charter for the city of West Sacramento. Mr. Robinson.
In August of 2015, the council voted to begin studying the possibility of creating a municipal charter for the city of West Sacramento. And at that time, the mayor assigned himself and individual council members to lead topic-specific discussions related to the charter. So those discussions were held over the succeeding months on topics including technology, innovation, and engagement, finance, budget, and elections, public safety, staffing, and franchises, and planning, zoning, and streamlining. Those presentations led to wide-ranging council discussions about what has made the city great thus far and what the city can do both to preserve what's already great here and to lay the groundwork for even more successes. Some of the ideas that the council discussed can only happen through a charter, while others can be pursued through other means if the council chooses. Attachment 6 to your staff report is a matrix that summarizes some but not all of the ideas that the council has discussed at these meetings. The staff reports that were associated with those meetings are also attached to tonight's staff report as well. The purpose of tonight's item is to seek direction from the council about whether to proceed with the drafting of a charter document. Should the council choose to proceed, staff will return as soon as possible with a draft document for the council to review. In the event that the proposed charter is the direction that you want to go, we need to bring back that document and have the council approve it by June in order to meet the deadline that Yolo County has in order to get the item on the ballot for the voters to consider in November. If the council doesn't wish to proceed with the charter at this time, it could decide to direct staff to look into any one of the various topics that you discussed at those meetings to explore in some other format other than through a charter. That's the end of my presentation. I want to keep my comments brief, so I'll, with that, turn it back over to the mayor for your discussion.
All right. Thanks, Mr. Robinson. I'll just lead off real quickly. I think we've devoted a lot of energy to try to figure this question out and to really dive deeply into the charter, the legal opportunities, some of the legal challenges and the legal constraints that we face, and also I think to be reflective about, as you said, some of the things that have made West Sacramento as successful as it is, and some of the challenges that we faced that might have structural solutions. It's been a challenge, I think, to some extent, because we're here. One of the things that's unique about this council is how it's had a long duration. Mr. Christoph's been on the council since we've been a city. It's been hard for us to even imagine, because it's never existed, a city council, a leadership that did not have the anchoring in the history of the place, the long-term fiscal view, the connection to community over special interests. We don't have a churn of council members that are constantly going off to other offices. I mean, there are things about the city that are odd compared to most other cities, which we do often take for granted. And in the charter, I think we tried where we could to get out of that space and say, what's the long term? Forget the people who are here now. The people who what is that? 12 of our colleagues that preceded us here, but to really think what's the right structure going forward. And but I think the conclusion that we've reached, at least from my perspective, is that we need to keep thinking about that, and we need to really evaluate what the right institutions and norms and rules and policies and structures are, but that a charter itself is probably not the right mechanism to accomplish that. That's not bad. I mean, if we had to do a charter, it would be fine. I mean, I think we scoped out lots of ways in which a charter could be framed that would be just fine and would probably be helpful, but not, at least from my perspective, probably not enough to justify the amount of effort and resources that we would have to devote in order to construct one, do the appropriate next stage of civic engagement around a charter, and then go to the ballot and ask the voters to approve it. The value proposition that I think we were hoping to find in several of these areas, whether it was in broadband and cable regulations, or in some of the economic development opportunities, just turn out not to be as compelling as some of the initial theories had been. So that's at least for me, that I think that's the conclusion that we've come to. Having said that, a lot of important things came from these sessions and from the research and through the conversations that have happened both here and elsewhere in the community around some of these issues. And so I think the attachment 6 is a good summary of several of those. They cross a wide range. I mean, the conversations that we had on technology and innovation, or on different approaches of land use, or the implications of autonomous vehicles. I mean, we had lots of policy conversations as well as charter-related things that I know were captured through this process, but we often said we could do that in the general plan, or we could do that through this other thing. We need to remember to at least consider doing those things in the general plan and then in that other thing, and not simply step forward from this process having finished it and not pull the value out of it, which was I think in many senses a reminder that we like to be, and we value being innovative, and we value using evidence to look at what the best practices are, and having a long-term view around those issues. So much of that's covered here, but I do think it's important that we think next about some of these lessons, some of these opportunities. Okay, what are the right venues that we might start tackling some of them? I don't mean to suggest that each week you come back to us with a update on how we've transitioned. We need to do that within the context of the decision opportunities. The general plan is a good example of that, and in the context of our strategic plan. But I think we've got some good source material through the work that we have done for being smarter and even better at some of our other policy making and decision making, including the general plan as we go forward from this process. So, just as a lead off, and we do have a request for public comment on it as well, but I wanted to give the individual members of the council an opportunity to at least give a lead off comment as we begin the discussion. Mr. Johansson?
Yeah, I would agree with you, Mr. Mayor, on kind of where this is going. I think it's been an interesting exercise. A lot of the community interaction with charters and chartism, I think it was educational to both sides. But there's a couple of areas here where I agree that we've got some policy kind of interest areas that should be captured at some point in the general plan, and if not the general plan, some other mechanism. But I think one of the things we were trying to do, at least the thought was, is to create some type of institutionalization of some of the processes that we do here. For example, the annual strategic plan, and just kind of things we think are allowing the city to move forward in a good way. The problem with that is you're tying the hands of future councils, and so there's kind of a tug on whether you should be doing that or not. But I think I think we move in the direction, at least my perspective, of trying to incorporate these things in other mechanisms to the extent we can. Obviously, we're not going to deal with dealing with elections or things like that in the general plan. So those, I don't think we have really any interest in doing anything like that anyway. But to try and capture as much as we can, and then lead by example for future councils. That obviously what we're doing at this point, or what we've been able to do, works. And if you're going to deviate it, you need to have, there should be some reason for doing that. Maybe this circumstance will change in the future, I don't know. But you just have to go into this.
Mr. Christoph.
Yeah, I concur. I concur with your comments, Mr. Mayor and Mark. I mean, there just doesn't seem to be enough, say, data or something that warrants changing from a general law city, which we are now, to a charter city. It just doesn't seem to be that there's enough meat and potatoes, so to speak, to warrant that. But at the same time, I think that there were some nuggets that did come to surface as we were having these various discussions and on the charter system. And I think that if we can find a way to put those nuggets into a form that a general law city can adopt, well, then I think we'd be better off. I mean, I think we'd be better to have some kinds of improvements if we can. The general plan is a good example, and there may be some things in there that we can look at, and we can incorporate the philosophical approach of a general law city, or that they have. But other than that, I mean, I think it's time that the charter concept and this and that doesn't overwhelm or doesn't continually start to surface and fester. We've had enough, and so I think it's just time to back off.
Comments?
Yeah.
Mr. Ledesma.
Thank you. Just a couple of comments. I know the public wants to weigh in as well, but I agree with my colleagues. This has been a great exercise, as maybe as frustrating as it has been, or the amount of questioning that it generated from the public about why we were doing this. And again, from my perspective, it was always about how could we as a city look to improve ourselves, how to be better. It's always been sort of the work ethic and the ethos of this city and this council. And we didn't shy away from this exercise. We took it on, and we wanted to see if indeed anything could stand out to motivate us to move to a charter city. I don't think collectively, I asked kind of maybe bring everything back together, so maybe, as Mr. Kristoff said, the accumulation of those nuggets might spur us to think otherwise, but reading through it, it just didn't pass the test. I think we're going to be better because of the exercises. Everyone's pointed out there are things we can implement as a result of this, and things, frankly, that allow us to reflect upon how we operate as a city that will influence our decision making going forward. I think that the election conversation brought that very forward about how we need to always revisit that, especially as we continue to grow to a larger city, which is, I think, most definitely in our future. And I know there were ideas specifically that I was drawn to around the finance area, which we looked at, because we do big things really well. We figured out how to come up with a community investment strategy, and through Measure G, we're enacting that this year. We have a lot of progress to build our infrastructure, but how can we be better at improving our neighborhoods and giving them the tools they need to do that? And maybe that's a part we can incorporate into our community investment plan and into 2017 and after. Again, just the recognition this brought back to us was worth it. So I applaud staff for being patient with us and going through this exercise with us, and I appreciate the community listening and asking questions about what this was about. I think we've been pretty transparent throughout this process. Just it was a question, maybe an itch that needed to be scratched, and we did that. And I am in full agreement with Mr. Kristoff that trying to do what we always do and say what's next and move on to the next one.
Pro Tem Cindy?
I do think I would love to hear the public comment. I can say at this point, I'm not seeing enough substantial substance improvements that we could make, I guess, for our city that through a charter. I think we do a lot with our innovation, and I do think this has brought up a number of issues where we might be able to change an ordinance or change a practice or a policy. So I think this was a time well spent. I also, as we're going forward, I think there's some issues that seem like the non-charter, the general law cities. There may be some legislative reform on the horizon, and so I think we could be a leader if we, in certain areas, if some issues come forward. But so I think it was important for us to understand a chartering process, having the discussion in the community, and folks here have been at a number of our meetings sharing their concerns and input. So I think it was time well spent. And again, I want to thank Mr. Robinson for all your work and taking our thoughts and kind of weaving them together.
All right, we do have one request to speak on this item. It's by Maria Grijalva.
Just to thank you for your decision, and you're very innovative.
I know this mic doesn't, you can't hear it in here, but it can be heard on the home one.
Just to thank you for your decision, I was going to cancel my comment. Just to thank you for your decision, and you're extremely innovative and very, very good at implementing all kinds of programs using other mechanisms. Where there's a will, there's a way. So thank you so much for your decision.
Thank you. All right. I think we've covered the ground. So I would just ask that we don't lose these elements. So and so what I'll say is if you don't actually take these things that we've talked about and you start to see some of them, I'll just ask for another charter review. So that's all right. So thank you. And again, as has been said, thanks to Mr. Robinson in particular. I mean, the whole staff has worked on this in one way or another. But Mr. Robinson really had to play point and get beat up on by both us and by others, you know, for elements of it. But it's been really strong work on a massive project across everything that the city does or could do or other cities do or other cities have thought about. So thanks for all of the hard work and inspiration. I think we've got some great outcomes from it. So. All right, that brings us to the consent agenda, which is items 5 through 12. Any item that a member of the council wishes to pull or any other question or comment? I'd like to pull 11, actually, from the consent agenda. Consider it separately. Anything else? Okay, item 6, then, is consideration of budget impact of public safety grant applications. Mr. Johannesson.
Oh, thanks. Hi, Phil. So, yeah, I just wanted to, okay with the staff. On the police, I know there's been some discussion about a police activity leave. Now, this particular type of program, is this specifically for what you've laid out here in terms of the family outings? Is it really kind of hardwired on what the money is to be used for, the kind of activities, or?
So I'm looking around, Councilman, for the chief, who, Lieutenant, can you comment on this? I have a general idea of the program, but I am not the subject matter expert on what the program is. My understanding is it's a summer program to get families and the kids together for activities, to be with police and people in the police department in a supportive sort of fashion, where they see them as people that are there to help them in their life experiences. But that's really
utilizing staff from other departments, but having an opportunity for kids to be able to do something in the evenings.
And it's just for how long of a period?
I believe it's the summer program.
So just this summer, right?
Correct.
And it would be grant funded.
Right. Okay. Yeah, that's a quick question.
On the fire one,
yes.
Is this the grant that Congresswoman Matsui has been jockeying for us and that we've had meetings in DC about, or is this a new one, an additional one?
No, this is that grant.
It is that grant.
But I do believe that after the last council meeting, because of some of the budget concerns, that our legislative, Mr. Robinson contacted our advocates to contact Matsui's office and say, don't do anything. We're really looking at whether we can afford to do this. I think we've taken care of that aspect of it.
Okay. Okay, great.
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Ledesma?
I've read the report before, but on item 7, I need to abstain from comment.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, so then on the consent agenda minus item 11, is there a motion?
So moved.
Moved by Mayor Pro Tem Standing, seconded by Mr. Johannesson. Actually, why don't we vote on item 7 separately as well, just for clean. So the consent agenda minus item 7 and item 11. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, that motion carries. Item 7. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Christoph, seconded by Mr. Johannesson. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed? Motion carries with Mr. Ledesma abstaining or recusing himself. Yes. That brings us then to item 11, which is the update on the draft social media policy. It's great. It's great to see this here. We've been our social media presence, like social media itself, has been changing and expanding dramatically since we had approved our first policy 5 years ago, the administrative policy. And I think what's proposed here is a good start, but I think it's important to consider a couple different lenses on this policy before we go forward with it. So it can be tempting to have the social media policy be all about engagement and hits and retweets and those metrics. It's important to think about social media though as an official form of communication and an official organ of the city. And that's partly around some of the standards that are in here around social media about what we're the kind of what we're trying to project, but it's also actually a strictly legal and ethical question as well for us. So things like political communications and FPPC rules that apply to the city when we print something, as an example. So the city cannot print a newsletter that is highlighting the fantastic work of a member of the city council with a full page or whatever, right? We can't do that for good reason. State law prevents us from doing that because that is using the public's resources in order to advance an elected official. Our social media policy needs to address the same question. Doesn't have to. The FPPC, I don't think, has been clear about it, whether what the rules of the game are. But even things like retweeting. What are the rules of the game for the city's Twitter account to be used to retweet a tweet by an elected official or by a political candidate? Right? I don't know that there are clear rules in the world, but that just gives us an opportunity to invent them. Because we do have, there may be legal issues, but there's definitely a policy issue that we should be addressing to make sure that we don't use the city's social media channels in ways that are inappropriate. Or unethical in that way, particularly when the campaigns are underway and all of that. It's important that we have some policy rules in that respect. So I think to me that's the number one issue that we need to address in the policy is around that. It's not just about the FPPC stuff though as well. I remember when we first set up our website, we would not link to particular companies or organizations in the city because there was concern that by doing so we were endorsing those institutions, and if something were to happen at those, the city, it wasn't appropriate for the city to be saying this is a good one, and that we didn't have a process or a way to navigate that. We need to consider that with respect to social media as well. So I don't know what the right answer is or if there is one, but the use of the city's social media channels to endorse things or people or is a matter that needs to be there needs to be policy about. I'm reminded a couple of weeks ago there was somebody had asked our Twitter account at the city, who are the best Twitter accounts to follow in West Sacramento, and we answered that with 5 or 6 of them, and one of them was me, so I should be happy about it. But the discretion for city government to say these are the 5 best social media channels to follow in West Sacramento, I think that raises a policy question about whether that's an appropriate function of us. Maybe it is, but we should be examining those issues around social media is an official channel of the government. It's not simply a promotional element. So the policy should be looking at those sorts of issues. So endorsements of businesses or products or what have you. It's not. I don't know that it needs to be an outright ban on that, but we should have some sort of some standards about when that's appropriate and in what way. In some cities, social media is used pretty aggressively to actually handle business, right? So somebody tweets or puts a Facebook post up saying, I'm trying to get a permit to open up a bar right next to the Learning Ladder preschool, and I'm having trouble. And then the Twitter account tweets back saying, oh, well, tell me the permit number, and it goes back and forth, and that creates all sorts of issues with respect to privacy, with respect to fairness, to access to the decision-making process. So part of the social media policy ought to be that the social media channels are a place of first impression, but that we're driving people to the appropriate channels of interaction. So that if you're tweeting about a fallen tree, that the response ought to be, call this number. File it on WestSat Connect, but if it's a back and forth, there are lots of risks with respect to both resource misallocation, but also privacy issues that get involved with that when you're actually conducting the city business through a series of sequential Twitter, Facebook, or Instagram, or other kinds of posts. And so an appropriate social media policy should be covering those kinds of instances. Then the last, and this one is less about the kind of legal ones I have been raising, is the voice of our social media accounts. And this is one I know I'm struggling with in several public agencies. Like how personal, how much should a government agency's Twitter or Facebook or Instagram account feel like it's an interesting, fun, bar hopping friend of yours, and how much should it be the government? Right, and this is you want it's for social media to be useful. It has to be engaging. It has to be something that you can connect to, but it can be taken too far, where that social media channel becomes it has its own personality, and we don't address that in the policy. But since we now have several of those channels, having some administrative approach. This is not a council adopted policy, but an administrative approach that is clear about what it is we're trying to achieve with the channels, which I think this goes a long way to accomplishing that, but then translates that to what is the voice of the account, and are we expecting that folks who are interacting with our social media channels are interacting with an individual person, or are they interacting with the organization as a whole? There's a fair amount of work that's been done on this in the marketing and social media field, both for government and for corporations as well. But I would definitely encourage you to take a look at some of these other policy issues, in addition to what's here already, which is be factual, be truthful. But I think our policy mostly has been about how do we drive up the maximum amount of interactions. That's useful. That definitely is an important goal to maximize public engagement through these channels. But they do require some policy framing around the ways in which that they're used for legal, ethical, and organizational issues as well. So I would encourage you to just take a second look at this, and maybe bring it back. Maybe consult with the attorney and look at a couple of best practices from other places. I'm sure you've already done, knowing how you do your work. I'm sure you've already done a fair amount of that. But in this lens of some of the legal implications about the way that we're handling referrals. So. Mr. Johannesson?
Yeah, I 100% agree with what the mayor said on some of the issues. I think the last thing we need is to have somebody bringing a project into the city, going back and forth on Twitter, and bringing that as part of the contract, and having some miscommunications. Is that an official voice of the city or not? So some disclaimer or something like that. I don't think you can do that on Twitter, but there's some way you can policy on that. And the other thing is just really kind of shines a light on the fact a lot of people don't have smartphones. And to the extent we're developing a media policy, we're still going to be leaving a huge number of people out in the community on even any kind of interaction. We've had a meeting on, we just discussed senior transportation, for example, and say, oh yeah, let's just get Uber. You're what? You can't get on your computer, you have to use a phone. People don't have phones. So, so there's this whole digital divide is really going to be pronounced. Probably the more successful our social media policy is. If you have a whole segment of our city that kind of knows what's going on, is very interactive, and a whole other part is completely left out. So, I don't know what the solution is. It's probably going to find some way to have everybody have a device and Wi-Fi connectivity, something along that line. But it is kind of an issue that we're going to have to address as we become stronger in social media.
Which at the end of that, especially we've been doing very well on social media. Paul and the team and our staff intern have been fantastic at actually building up those social media channels in ways that I know citizens in the community value the information that's out there and the recognition that's been happening. So we've been doing a great job. We haven't had any of these big problems, but all it means is that it's more important that we get the policy stuff right. So, okay. All right. So if there's no objection, we will continue that item to a future. All right, that brings us into item 13, which is public hearing and first reading of ordinance 16-3 and 16-4 regarding proposed amendments to Title 17 of the Municipal Code and a development agreement at 3121 Evergreen Avenue. Ms. Hamilton.
Good evening, Mayor Quellman and members of the City Council. Charlene Hamilton, Redevelopment Director, and Assistant City Manager Amanda Berlin will be presenting over here so that hopefully people at home and in the audience can hear. So this item tonight seeks consideration of two ordinances. Ordinance 16-3 would amend Title 17 of the Municipal Code, which is zoning, to add cannabis distribution facility as a defined land use and also listed in the land use matrix as a conditional use in the M1 zone with additional measures. Ordinance 16-4 would approve a development agreement between the project proponent, which is River Wellness, also doing business as River Collective, which would implement additional measures, and different from a conditional use permit, the development agreement does not run with the land. The project proponent proposes to operate a legal medical marijuana distribution facility in accordance with the Medical Marijuana Regulation and Safety Act, which came into effect in January 2016. The 17,237 square foot facility will solely be a distribution warehouse for storage and transportation of legal medical marijuana products. No cultivation, manufacturing, or retail sale of the medical marijuana will occur at this facility. There will be no exterior signage on the building. Staff, including representatives from police and fire, have reviewed the proposal and have provided input to minimize the facility's potential effects on the community. The development agreement requires River Wellness to submit and abide by a public safety and security plan. A couple of items that, just to outline, we don't want to go into detail on that because that proposes other risk management issues. But some of the items that we can talk about are the unmarked armored cargo vans will be used to transport the product throughout California and through West Sacramento. The vehicle traffic will be similar to or less than other existing distribution facilities in the city. Security measures include perimeter fencing, video cameras, and multiple zones, creating layers of security and intrusion points. The delivery and receiving hours are anticipated to be from 6 a.m. to 8 p.m. The facility and its operations will be compliant again with the Medical Marijuana Regulation and Safety Act by obtaining local permits from us, as well as state licensure upon issuance of the licenses by the Department of Consumer Affairs. The development agreement also has a term for the applicant to make quarterly payments to the city of 2.5% of total revenue from the operation of the facility. On March 13th, 2016, the Planning Commission did consider both of these ordinances along with the conditional use permit. They only provided a vote recommending approval after much discussion on the two ordinances, and those resolutions are contained in attachments 8 and 9 of this agenda report. They did not act on the conditional use permit, deciding to continue that item. The items raised and discussed at the Planning Commission included security measures, impacts to the neighborhood, hours of operations and deliveries, number of truck trips, waste disposal if a package gets broken, possibly including conditions that mirror the state regulations for alcohol distribution, concerns as to whether there would be odors from the product emanating from the facility. There was a good discussion about the business model, number of employees, what types of employees, do they have contracts with existing cultivators and dispensaries, and kind of how far reaching would their distribution be in California, what locations. There was a discussion about handling and accounting of payments and the receipts. Concerns about the federal status of marijuana and whether or not 2.5% is the right revenue percentage. For the council's reference, we did include the draft conditions of approval in the agenda report. Those are contained in attachment 10. Those are still under consideration by the Planning Commission. They will take up their continued consideration tomorrow night on the use permit. They wanted first for the City Council to have the discussion on the zoning amendment consideration. So that's my report at this point in time. In closing, the project proponent does have their team here, and they do have a presentation.
All right, other questions for staff at this time?
All right, then let's go to the project proponent's presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and council members and staff. My name is, I'm going to try and move this up a little bit. I'm Lauren Frazier, and I'm representing River Wellness. We are a not-for-profit entity that's been founded to serve the medical cannabis community in California.
And your microphone is not live in the room, so without straining, the more you can project, the better for the audience to be able to hear. Thanks.
As Ms. Hanson mentioned, our organization is different than most medical cannabis businesses. We're not in the business of cultivating or manufacturing product, nor retailing to patients or doing any direct delivery to patients. We're strictly focused on the activity of wholesale distribution and secure transportation, consistent with the regulations laid out in the MMRSA, or Medical Marijuana Regulation and Safety Act. And we are seeking a conditional use permit for that legal cannabis distribution facility here in West Sacramento. So just to bring up the definitions of what those rules are from the MMRSA, a distributor is licensed to engage in the business of purchasing medical cannabis from licensed cultivators and manufacturers for sale to licensed dispensaries. A transporter is licensed to engage in the business of transferring medical cannabis and medical cannabis products between other licensed entities. So in fulfilling these functions, our responsibility to regulators is to ensure supply chain integrity through secure storage and transfer of product, as well as to verify that before that product enters the retail environment, it has been verified as safe through a licensed testing facility. So we take these responsibilities very seriously and consider ourselves a partner in compliance to both the local and state regulating agencies who are seeking to ensure public safety, consumer safety, non-diversion, and revenue collection for both the local and state agencies. And those are some of the key policy objectives of the MMRSA. Our organization has kind of three core functions: procurement, warehousing, and fulfillment. So on the procurement side, it's picking up the product, acquiring the product from licensed producers, and transporting it to our warehouse facility. Warehousing is inventory management and quality control, and then the fulfillment aspect is that wholesale delivery to licensed dispensaries. Our infrastructure plan includes warehousing, vehicles, systems, and personnel. On the warehousing side, we are looking for discrete and secure facilities that are strategically located throughout the state along key transportation corridors and within a reasonable distance to core retail hubs throughout the state. The use of the facilities will be comparable to traditional distribution and industrial warehouse types in the zone, with minimal tenant improvements required. Facilities will have a fence perimeter, gated parking, roll-up doors, interior loading docks, secured vaults, control access points, 24/7 security alarm system, and cameras. And our hours of operation will be either 6 a.m. to 8 p.m. or whatever is required by state as well as local if we decide that it should be something different than it is, but core transportation hours would range between that time. Vehicles, armored special vehicles for long distance transport from production zones to warehouses. That's typically a larger volume of product than other vehicles that might be utilized for that more localized transport from warehouse to dispensary, where there's a lower volume of product in the vehicle at a time. We have enterprise resource software for inventory management and traceability software, delivery and routing. Everything would be transparent and accessible to regulating agencies. Safety training, risk management, extensive security systems, these are all important and critical components of our infrastructure. And then our personnel, our management team has over 150 years of combined experience in distribution businesses, some actually right here in West Sacramento. 30-plus combined years of experience in accounting and financial services, and another 30-plus combined years of cultivation and procurement of cannabis products in California. We will have a unionized workforce for our warehouse and transportation functions, and a qualified account management team to maintain relationships with retailers throughout the state. So the new laws require both state and local approval. So in order for us to operate in compliance, it's important for us to secure a local permit and operate in good standing with every local jurisdiction in which we are storing product. We currently have business licenses for wholesale cannabis distribution in the city of Berkeley and have an application in process in the county of Humboldt. We feel that West Sacramento is an ideal location between key production zones and easily accessible to retail hubs here in the Sacramento area, as well as the Bay Area and Central Valley. Members of our executive team, like I mentioned, have run distribution businesses here in West Sacramento, so we have a familiarity with how the city works, and we know that you're a leader in terms of supporting industry. And we believe West Sacramento is a progressive partner for our business. From the tone of your council meeting today and our experience thus far with the staff, we can see the care and consideration that you take in every business decision and every decision for your city, and we appreciate that, and we want you to know that we want to be a very strong partner with you in that. So we welcome your questions, and thank you very much for your time and consideration.
All right, thank you. Are there any questions at this point? All right, thank you.
Okay.
All right, then we'll pursue, or is it, and the staff presentation is completely finished? Okay, then we'll go to, we have a couple of requests for public comment on this item. The first is by Zika Allen. I've never seen this name before, so I probably pronounced it wrong.
My name is Hezekiah Allen.
Hezekiah, I did not almost get it right.
Almost, you were real close.
That wasn't even close.
First and foremost, I am, for the last year and a half, a resident of West Sacramento. I'm the executive director of the California Growers Association. I grew up in Humboldt, a grower all of my life, but ultimately decided it was time for the state to solve this 19-year impasse and moved down here to sort of focus on that. Through the course of that process, I met Lauren and several of her colleagues and associates, and we have worked closely together on ultimately building what we think is a very solid foundation for addressing the Wild West problems that have afflicted our state since the passage of Proposition 215, with the continued failure of the state legislature to provide any real meaningful regulatory framework. One of the challenges in a state as diverse as California is being mindful and respectful of local governments, of the unique community values that the different cities and counties, this is a big and great state. And so the MMRSA, the Regulatory and Safety Act from 2015, is built on a fundamental agreement, a two-track licensing agreement that Lauren mentioned. State and local permits are required. One of the biggest challenges as this industry looks to mature and grow into regulation is filling the gaps that previously had been the most challenging. For several years now, it's been relatively safe to grow a reasonable amount, and it's been relatively safe to sell and purchase a reasonable amount at dispensaries. However, how the product gets from one part of the state to the other has been a real challenging issue. Trafficking is, of course, something that has continued to plague this industry. And so the breakthrough with the MMRSA of establishing a framework that has the support of law enforcement, of the local government associations in Sacramento, is really critical. And distribution is, in my opinion, one of the most challenging components of making this transition, which will generate tremendous public benefit, both for the city here, but I think for the state, regionally as well as the entire state. And so I just want to, first and foremost, let you know that over the last 18 months of getting to know these guys, they're fantastic. From my perspective, they've been great partners. They've been very good partners with friends, family, and community members in Humboldt County in working to craft this regulation and to implement it. And then secondly, I wanted to commend you. I had no idea I'd love West Sac quite as much as I did when I moved down here, but I do like it a lot. And the fact that we're here, in this early stage, and that you are considering this. I was with Metro Planning Commission the other night. That was a lot of fun. Just want to, commend you and thank you for considering this and for being open to the future. California needs a well-regulated cannabis future, and distribution really is a first step, and local permits are where it all starts. So thank you for your vision, and look forward to talking more with you in the future.
All right, thank you. And Tim Moreland?
Mayor, City Council members, I'd like to thank you for this opportunity. My name is Tim Moreland. I am the Legislative Director for Chairwoman Fiona Mott, the State Board of Equalization. I believe this is an essential part for locals to properly regulate this industry. I'm happy that you're considering this proposition before you. I believe regulating distributors is an essential part of, it's a first step in regulating this industry. Why am I here? Good question. I'm here to give some backdrop on why the BOE was supportive of the distributor. First of all, we have a long history with collecting taxes from distributors, especially in the alcohol and tobacco industry, collecting excise taxes. So that was one of the main reasons we were here. We were supportive of that idea while these regulations were going through the process. Two, I believe the distributor is an optimal place to test the product and to do quality control. It's a central choke point for localities in the state to properly regulate this product. And this should be tested. This is medicine. This is for patients, and this should be tested. And I believe the distributor plays a key role in that. And three, the BOE, along with California Department of Food and Agriculture, is responsible for track and trace. The distributor, in our thoughts, gives an optimal place to know where the product comes from the cultivation site or a nursery, and then where it's going to go in the next step of the process, either to a manufacturer or to a dispensary. That way, at least on the BOE's prerogative, we can track taxable sales in the process, or we can audit this product. I don't know if you know, but auditing from dispensaries right now is very tricky for the State Board of Equalization. We have a very low compliance rate, probably about 25 to 30%. And that's due to a variety of factors: banking, Schedule I drug on the federal level, and sometimes just some bad actors as well. I, once again, just want to reiterate, we're a strong supporter of distributorship. We argued for this and will continue to be a supporter of this at the State Board of Equalization, and would like to, if the city mayor has any questions for my office, please feel free to contact us. Thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, those are all the requests we have to speak on this item, so we'll return to the council for further questions or discussion. Mr. Christoph?
I got a couple. On the safeguards, I realize it's an internal kind of thing, but has our police chief worked with their security staff to ensure that that there's no theft on site, and how all of that works? Because I mean, now we've got this drug coming in, and needless to say, there certainly are a number of characters out there, and so has our chief set up security rules, regulations, or are they people patted down or whatever? How's all that work?
So the project proponents brought in security specialists. They developed a plan. Chief McDonald and Lieutenant Steele attended meetings. They didn't advise them on their security plan, because that's not really our city's, their goal, but they did review the plans, and they met also on site, so they could visually go over things. And they have communicated to planning staff that they're satisfied with the security plan that's been put forth so far.
Okay. Have we done any research on the 2.5%?
Yes, at the Planning Commission's questions, our finance division and administrative services, specifically Assistant City Manager Phil Wright, did reach out to municipal finance experts who have experience with the medical marijuana industry. And what we received back is that a wholesale distribution such as this, that the 2.5% was a reasonable rate. Since this is not going to be where retail sales are occurring or sales taxes collected, that some of the higher percentages that were mentioned by the Planning Commission, that would be more for an actual retail site where the sales tax is being collected.
So now we're talking about medical marijuana, and we put a development agreement together that addresses all of that. In November, I think that there's going to be an initiative, and if that initiative passes, do we have to change our development agreement? Do we have to put a whole new whatever it is together again for something else?
No, because the local government still retains discretion over that. So that is something that we could bring back to you if you wanted to entertain, more recreational marijuana, but at the same time, it would also stand as medical marijuana should you choose to leave it that way.
Well,
and if the city attorney has a different interpretation, invite him to chime in.
I agree. Right now, as drafted, the distribution facility would be limited to medical marijuana. It would require a change in the zoning code, something about it. If your broader question is there a possibility that there'll be something contained in the ballot measure that might conflict? That's always a possibility. We'll evaluate that and know what the ballot measure actually says. And obviously, so we will look at that.
Okay.
And there will be a clear time for us to decide.
Okay. Yeah, because this is an issue that I'm really conflicted over, because I don't believe in that marijuana should be legalized. I'm a little disappointed that it's gone as far as it has already with medical marijuana. And for us to approve this agenda item, to me, seems like we're sort of sticking our toes under the tent in this whole realm of drugs. I realize that there is no growing in the city of West Sacramento, and I realize that there are no dispensaries involved. And so, I mean, it's something that isn't sort of giving our blessing to the industry, but at the same time, it's just sort of just opening up the door, a little bit of a crack in the door, and I'm not all that comfortable with it. Not that I would oppose this measure, and the reason is because there's no sale, there's no growing, and there's no dispensary involved here. And so for somebody just to bring the product in, to separate it out to the store or where dispensary that it's going to, I mean, it's a little bit different, but at the same time, as I said earlier, I'm just sort of conflicted. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Christoph. Mr. Ledesma.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First, thanks, Mr. Christoph. Just to clarify, this is the first reading of this. We're not approving tonight. So we'll come back, I think, later in the month. Okay.
Yeah, but the planning commission hears what we're talking about.
Oh, I know they're watching.
They'll never know.
No, I appreciate staff bringing this up to us, and the work the planning commission has done already, kind of vetting this out. And you know, a couple of this. You know, I have to admit, Christoph, I'm always a little conflicted when it comes to this issue. I think my first meeting as a council member had to do with medical marijuana dispensaries, and so it's always been this subject that has had to cross a little mental hurdle in my head. I've been growing up in the just say no generation about how we deal with marijuana. So I'm feeling my way through and see. I will say what the state law has done is taken a step where we were a little muddy before. We got that first meeting, and remember the mayor always is very eloquently calling out the state for not giving us any framework whatsoever. And it was really this gentleman from the Wild West. It really is. But having this opportunity to look at our local ordinances and how we set the table on the policy, how we want to handle it, it's a welcome thing to know that the state has at least gave us some amount of, and really a large amount of the seat at the table and given us dual licenses, which brings to my first question. So it's a little bit of chicken or the egg. So they have to get their business permit from us, or not the conditional use permit. I'm just trying to get the sequencing here, because we don't have to require a license from them.
Right, they need to have their local permit, basically,
okay,
in order to be in line to get their state license.
Right.
Since the state hasn't been issuing any licenses yet.
Okay.
So, but the law requires both local approval and state approval.
Okay, thank you. And so what they're requesting, what we're doing here is, just so it's clear for the public, we're looking at our zoning ordinance as to how we would allow it in a certain zone, and how back to and what steps we might take or ask for as they come about. So I'm looking at some of the requirements. I have more questions. So just to make sure I understand the steps, and then the conditional use permit, which is being considered by the planning commission, will provide another layer of oversight at the project level, correct?
Yes, that brings in like the performance standards and measures through the use permit.
Okay, thank you. On the security side, because I have questions a little bit around that, because the applicant referenced what the state asked them to do. There are certain safeguards the state is asking distributors to take with the license. And maybe it comes in the next reading, or I didn't quite see it kind of itemized here, what they require at the baseline, and then what are we requiring on top of it. I get the point they came with the security plan, but do we know that security plan met the state requirements, or I'm just trying to compare both those concepts.
So
or are they comparable? I get them here.
They're a little, I mean, there are some components that overlap. I think you're referring to like the tracking system that the state's going to require.
I don't even know what they require, so that's what I'm.
So we can bring more detail on that in the second reading.
Yeah, because I'm not sure the specifics of like what if any the state requires for safety and security plans.
If there is some, you can bring that back prior to the next reading. I think would be suffice.
If the applicant has something with
I'll let the mayor make a judgment call. I think they've spoken, not to mention the bad audio tonight. I'm not interested anyway, but I'll ask for maybe that come in the next reading. Just kind of understand what the state standards are, and I didn't have a whole lot of time to kind of look at the MMRSA as a way to kind of what's actually enacted. And then the other question I had around what's allowed. I'm sorry, there's a staff report. And the staff report talks about obviously the no cultivation or retail sales will occur at the facility. And I just want to make sure that distribution of it is the applicant or the company that has the license the only one allowed to transport it in or out. Is that?
Yes, I believe that's actually contained in the state legislation.
Okay, so no other entities can come forward and say, I'm going to pick up mine, you know, even though it's for a dispensary and somewhere else, they can't come pick it up from that side. It has to be, yeah.
Our understanding that this distributor.
Even though there's no retail sales there's no other kind of pickup
There's
facility.
no on-call pickup.
Yeah, that's what I'm making sure. Okay. And I did agree, kind of, I know the conditional use permit on the project will give us the ability to sort of re-up that. Is that what's the lifespan of the conditional use permit that the commission will look at?
The conditional use permit
Is it
doesn't really have a termination date, but we have tied the two together with the development agreement. And the purpose of that is that absent the development agreement, the use permit would run with the land, so another operator could come in if they were to close. And that kind of plays into the whole security and wanting to know, who the businesses are. And so with the development agreement is exclusive.
Okay.
And so that's not transferable, at least not without our permission to another entity.
It is transferable when you have the city's permission, which we can impose it on our sole discretion.
I think I've heard that. Okay.
So it is transferable, but it's solely in the discretion of the city council.
Okay. And then
You have to consent to that transfer.
right, and then I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor.
No.
The last question around is so will if I'm sure I trust our police force implicitly. They're great, I'm sure they reviewed it. But again, when all the safeguards are taken, how will we know that they're abiding by their security plan? They gave us a plan, we reviewed it, we okayed it, but it's not like we get to enforce that they're abiding by that. It's not.
So there will be annual reviews, both on the development agreement, and part of that will be an annual review of the security plan. And obviously, if there's any issues that crop up, police at that time can, call a meeting with the business and make adjustments as needed.
Yeah, the development agreement allows review at least annually and at other times upon request.
Yeah, and I saw that. I just want to make sure that in that review we get to see, have some sort of performance metric, or at least I don't know what those are. But this, if there are police calls there, or there, and again, I'm hoping for the best, but trust and verify, right? So if we were to do this, and we see an aggregate of activity that wasn't planned, let's be clear about where the location is here. There's housing close by, there's other, and maybe it's the mental hurdle in my head, so computation. But again, that's the part. I want to make sure we have the ability to review, right? So that we can see what kind of impact it has had on the neighborhood, on the community in that area. We don't want to put something there and have unintended consequences that were fully preventable. So, and that's all my comments and questions.
Mayor Pro Tem Sandin?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's no surprise to me that there's an interest in having a logistics or a distribution center here. I think we're known, we're at a crossroads. We are right at the 5, 80, and 50. We actually are a really great location. We have a number of businesses like that in our city. So it doesn't surprise me that there's an interest for this kind of distribution center. I think, would echo some of the safety concerns, and so I may have a question maybe for the city attorney, because I'm not sure, I'm trying to figure out if we move forward with this, and then we were to have a series of incidents. Again, like my colleague, Mr. Lesma, it sounds like what we've heard, the security plan is very sound, and things are very well organized with the company, and that's really important to them, because that's important to their business. They wouldn't be able to expand the business if there were a number of issues. So I think that is something that's a pressure on the business to do well. But if all of a sudden, for some reason, because we made a decision to cite this business, and then we then had to call out the SWAT team over and over and over, and there's a huge expense to the city, like, I don't know, that wouldn't be something that would be annual. That might be something that would have to be more dramatic than that. So my question is, I don't know if we can put some kind of limitation or lever to get our comfort, to have some comfort about the exposure we might be adding to our residents and to the police and fire departments. So that's a little bit what I'm struggling with. Again, I'm not at all surprised about the interest, and I think we are a great location for a lot of companies to have distribution centers here. And I think we have a lot of those. So that's not what surprised me, but I just don't know about the levering.
Well, I think as Lynn mentioned, in addition to annual reviews, there are reviews upon request, and I don't have the exact number in front of me. My understanding of the way we look at this was the idea that the result of that review would be an opportunity to adjust the safety and security plan. You'll see it one having to do with required modifications. And it does have to be approved by the constitutional fire chief. So I think if we have a situation where repeating calls for problems identified, and in particular problems that need to be resolved, substantially against the modifications of the plan, we were able to do it in this fire.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Maybe just to kind of comment off Councilmember Sandy Haines' question. Is there an obligation to report thefts, whether or not you report to the police or not?
I mean, like say there's a theft within the facility, would we know about that if they never reported to the police?
There is nothing in these documents that would require it.
Is that something that would, come out in an audit if they, like, say it's like something that's happened there, they don't want anybody to know about it, they don't call the police, but there's been substantial theft. I don't know.
I think could. I'm seeing nods. So yes, we could add some language that would obligate them to report any theft of product that occurs on site.
Yeah, I think that's a good suggestion. Whether it's in the CUP and/or the development agreement, some performance-based look at this. Because if we approve this, we will be one of the first movers. We can only anticipate so many of the issues and try to protect against every possible eventuality. But our real concern is in this domain is we don't want a lot of criminal activity happening at the site. And so if we can express that in the CUP, so even if you have a fantastic security plan and you're fully executed, if it's still causing that problem for reasons that we could not have anticipated early, that should be as I'm reading it, we wouldn't have the ability to revoke the DA or the permit, and we should. So that to me that would resolve a lot of the how do we figure out all the details in advance. But instead, our bottom line is we want some basic level of performance around all of this. So I appreciated that line of discussion. I think that would be improved in that way. There's several points in here, so where just as a technical matter, where in the CUP, in the DA, and in the zoning amendments, where we make reference to the general public as our safeguard, that won't be open to the general public, and in some of these documents there won't be retail sales. We need to lock this down more clearly, that there won't be sale or distribution of any kind to patients directly. I mean, that's not I don't want to be in a situation where someone's making a legal argument that medical marijuana patients with a card are not the general public, so our ban does not apply to them. Or medical marijuana patients that are part of a collective that don't pay for the product are not the general public, and that's not a retail sale. So that language could easily be clearer around what the protections are. Similarly, with respect to the definition in the proposed code language about what a cannabis distribution facility is, to Mr. Ledesma's point, because we're referencing a code section, and it would not shock me if the legislature next year were to take the same code sections and simply change them to be about about recreational marijuana use if the voters adopt the initiative. The framework that we're referencing could become about that. And so we need to be clear that whatever those code sections say, that we will have to come back and look at our zoning amendment. Again, even if this sections of the BMP code are changed to deal with recreational marijuana, that we're still limiting to medical marijuana at this facility until we change it, which we probably would, but we need the ability to accomplish that. So I think that I think is what it's. I think that's accomplished here, but it could be tighter in that respect. Now, in the general, the other thing, I would like to change the term cannabis distribution facility to something else, because that instantly implies just dispensary. Maybe it's cannabis logistics and distribution facility, but something that evokes the idea in your head that what we're talking about is the industrial function. I think would be helpful in that in the zoning code. So, but having said all that, I appreciate the journey that has been expressed around the council, around the table, around the issue, because there is it's a pretty significant change that's been happening in society, and with the medical marijuana changes, and now with the ballot initiative in November. But I think, as Ms. Andy says, this is our wheelhouse. The distribution, logistics, food safety, and sensing and monitoring and security. That's exactly what we do. Our approval of a land use framework for industrial uses should never imply our moral sanction of that use. The oil tanks in our city are a significant contributor to global warming, which I don't like. But we permit them, right? We think people should be using less fossil fuels, but we permit the distribution facilities for oil and gas in the city. Sierra Chemical is producing, manufacturing, and distributing chemicals that are far more dangerous if they were to fall off of a truck or to be released, in some other way, than this facility, and we permit it. And we don't. I don't know what exactly they're making each day, but there are protocols in place for that to be appropriately regulated. Yara and the ammonium hydroxide facilities. I mean, we have much more significant facilities that we regulate in the city that have far greater potential to create harm. But that we have a set of appropriate protocols for protection, both within the city and by other public agencies, in order to accomplish that. Drugs. McKesson is one of the major drug distribution facilities in the entire Northern California, in our city, and so access to high potency prescription drugs and other drugs can be achieved here. Again, we don't endorse any particular product that they're making. But it's already here. That's NorCal Beverage. If we were in Davis, we might be trying to discourage children from drinking soda. But we're bottling soda here in the city. That's not a moral endorsement of sugary soft drinks. NorCal is a valued company providing a lot of jobs in our city, and that's what we do. We're the logistics and distribution hub for the region. And if the Shane Company were to move its diamond distribution business here, which would be similar, to the notion that this will be an attractive, because of the value of the marijuana that would be in the facility, that it would be a target for crime. That's true of many other things in our warehousing and distribution districts. And I wouldn't be in a position where I would say I don't want the Shane Company to locate its worldwide distribution headquarters here, because it would become a magnet for crime. And so I've been on this journey with everyone. I completely get it, but just trying to think. Okay, I'm too old to be experimenting, so this is not going to be for me. But just in terms of what it is that what is currently happening, what's coming, and then how it relates to what we already do and what we do well, and what is the core of our economy here in West Sacramento. It seems like the sensible, practical approach to be taking if we get as we tune the details as has been talked about by my colleagues on the council. So I'm supportive of the framework. I think there are some tweaks that need to be made to get it exactly right, but I think this is that we're the right city actually to be leading on this and figuring out how to do it in a clear-headed way. So. I'm supportive of moving forward towards the final approval. Mr. Kristoff.
Charlene, during the Planning Commission deliberation, were there any questions asked of the Board of Equalization or the banking industry in some way? Because it's a cash business. And it's my understanding that there's no agreements between the banking industry and the funds that come in from the various dispensaries. And so they have to be very careful on what they do and how they do it. Was there any discussion about that?
There was a little, yes. There was a question that came up about under their business model and how they handle accounting and payments and receipts, and there was a reference to the fact that it's mostly an all-cash industry at this time because of some of the banking issues. But the state, is putting forth through their some regulation on how they need to account and report to the state on those receipts. So the discussion wasn't specific about the Board of Equalization. It was more just about the business model and,
because we have a banker on the council, I'm sure that he can,
yes.
It
wasn't so much about monetary value. It was, again, more about security and, wondering, what cash might be present on the vehicles or at the facility and making sure that the security plan covered that.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Other comments or discussion? All right, so we have a set of recommended actions by staff. So
Along with the changes that you...
Along with the changes that have been
some small additions, is that acceptable?
Okay.
Yes.
All right, so it's been moved by Mr. Johannesson and seconded by Mayor Pro Tem Sandine. If there's no further discussion, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. Thank you. All right, that brings us to item 14, which is a presentation of the midterm budget report.
You have it in front of you or not?
Not yet.
Oh, it is working. Very good. Good evening, Mayor Cabalden, members of the council. Tonight, staff is presenting a budget report in anticipation of the midterm budget workshop that will be before you on May 18th. The goals tonight are to preview how the city is doing financially a little bit before we start the budget process with you, to identify some issues so that you're aware of some issues that we will need to address, outline the schedule and some other financial matters that you'll hear between now and May 18th, including one tonight immediately following this presentation, and get any direction from council before we come to you with the workshop. So the Budget Committee has had 2 meetings. We have 3 more scheduled. We're working diligently to have a balanced budget ready for you for your consideration, actually first for the city manager and then for you on May 18th. So quick overview, this is sort of the 50,000-foot view of how we're doing. The revenues are projected for 15-16 to be about 224,000 above where we had in the budget, so that's good. We're projecting about 412,000 above budgeted for 16-17, so our budgeted numbers are actually being exceeded a little bit. Property taxes are continuing to slowly grow, although I will point out they're still below 2007 levels, so we haven't even gotten all the way back. Sales tax are starting to improve as well. Sales tax revenues are projected to be right about budget. I think I've mentioned to the council before, this is the most difficult year. All of the sales tax consultants are really struggling to evaluate what's happening with sales tax because of the end of triple flip. And obviously in our case, it's also the loss of HD Supply and Macy's makes our sales tax numbers really hard to project. We're projecting, though, the budget, although finance staff is very nervous about that number, to be honest, and we're really monitoring it every month, and we want to make sure if we simply took where we are right now and projected the same increase we've had the first 7 months, we would actually be 300,000 below budget. So we're paying particular attention. We went back to our consultant. They're comfortable we're going to hit our numbers, but we will keep you apprised on that very carefully. Projecting an increase to 218,000 the next year. For 15-16, our expenditures are right about where they should be. That would be better news if we didn't have a number of vacancies. So a lot of the savings is because of vacancies, so we shouldn't get, departments are doing a good job of controlling the cost, but we're not saving the money we were hoping to save through the vacancies. We're projecting significantly higher expenditures in 16-17 already, some of which the council will have to approve, but there's not a lot of leeway because they're charges that we don't have much control over. Utility costs have gone up significantly at the rec center and the community center. We weren't being charged for a long time by the school district, and now we are. Animal control costs, I think, as you know, have gone up significantly. So if we're going to keep doing animal control the way we're currently doing it, the costs are going to go up. Our workers' comp have gone up, not as significantly, but they've gone up. And one of the things we try to do in the finance division is do the budget better every time we do it. That's part of why we're doing this presentation tonight, to give you a little heads up. But we have gotten hit a few times with retirements that we didn't anticipate, so we've done a much better job really looking to have any payouts in the budget so we don't get caught. And so that we have a number of employees that we think are going to retire in the next year, and we're going to have to pay those out. Other issues to be aware of for Public Works, the big issue I'll talk about when I get into a little more detail is just the timing of the ICAP reimbursement. So it's not an issue that's going to be an immediate problem, but it's a timing issue. I think the council is aware that we have a number of community development projects that we believe were going to come in this fiscal year that have not come in, and that we don't know if they're going to come in. And so we have an issue with the community development department that we are going to have to address. And then similar to that, all of our capital improvement funds that are benefit from development are getting significantly reduced income. And so we have some challenges in our capital funds. So going into a little bit more detail first on the general fund. So you can see on the general fund that our projected revenues are $481,000 above, above what we projected. So our revenues are coming in. Again, property tax is the big benefactor for us. When you look at the expenditures, they're about $220,000 below. So all in all, that means we're in a better position. We're looking at a projection of $566,000 operating surplus. We've already committed $50,000 of strategic plan initiative, you may recall, for the the age-friendly cities. So that's the $50,000 out of there. And then, so that leaves us at $699 is our projected cash balance at the end of the year. Again, with the community development challenges, we have to use some of that money to balance the general, the community development fund if we don't have other solutions, which we're working on. So Public Works, if you look at the, I'm sorry, can you go back one? I didn't hit 16, 17. So just again, looking at 16, 17, you can see that our projected revenues continue to increase. We're projecting property tax at another 5% increase. We've talked to the county again. We think that we're comfortable with that number. Sales tax is about a 1.3 increase over the 1.9 we had projected, so our sales tax continue to get better. So we're projecting about $643,000 cash balance, or almost $700,000 in operating. You know, those numbers seem high, but I'm sure when you think about a $44 million budget, $44 million budget over 2 years, 1.3 million, it's 1.5% a year. So we're out of the downturn where we're not having to cut, but we're in a very slow growth up pattern. Okay, Public Works. Important thing to note here is that those numbers are a bit misleading. Right now, we're actually $973,000 in the hole. But finance staff is not concerned about that at this point because we just have finalized our agreement with Caltrans after a lot of work by Claire Connor and my staff and Dennis Zombie, our director, trying to figure out the rules. And we now can use the 108% ICAP, which was last year's ICAP, that's the indirect cost allocation, and then we'll true it up at the end of the year. So we will get that money. Whether we get it by June 30 or not is actually irrelevant as long as we know we're going to get it. We could do a one-day loan and then just pay it back. So we look like we're going to hit about $264,000 in the positive. You can see the next year we're looking at a red number, which is not what we try to get here, but that's really just caused by the payoffs. And usually when you have a payoff, you have a period of time in the recruitment where you don't fill the position, and so we're not overly concerned that we're going to, with this fund. I think this fund has gotten, Denix has done a good job getting this fund under control, so we feel much better about public works engineering. Right, next. So again, community development has been hit with a number of projects that have just not come in that we thought were going to come in, and the community development director and the finance staff work obviously when we do the budget to really try to make sure we hit these numbers. But Summerfield Place that we were absolutely sure was going to come in this year has not. It still might, but it's, you know, nip and tuck at this point. The Younger property we thought was going to be the permits by this time, but it'll probably be the end of this calendar year. And then Liberty that we really thought was going to come in, it's been pushed already. And I know they're working, but we don't think that's going to come in this year. So we have a negative $730,000 problem, but between now and May 18th, staff is working, and we will have proposed solutions of how we're going to deal with this. Wanted council to be aware of it before we hit you on May 18th with a problem and hopefully a solution. Yes, absolutely.
On this one, so
yes.
We have a deficit because we have a team of staff working in community development, but we haven't had the flow of these projects. So what have they been doing? Are we buying a $730,000 even better general plan update out of this? With this sort of, I mean, how does it relate to the allocation of workload? I mean, if we were to use a general fund subsidy in order to buy this out, is there a general fund purpose that we're accomplishing?
Sure. Well, I'll address it. We'll have more details for you on May 18th, but let me give you a couple answers, I think. So some is people have done work on things that could have been billed, and we're in the process. You know, Charlene is working on going back and looking on some of the work that didn't get assigned properly, and so we hope to reduce that deficit that way. Number two, one of the challenges we're having is we do great customer service, and we have had a lot of small projects, and her staff, we budget about 3 meetings on these small projects, and they've been having 4 and 5 and 6. Really hand-holding, because that's what we try to do with our customers. But we're going to have to, you know, look at whether we can continue to afford to do these things. We have some other areas, and for example, Public Works is doing well number-wise, but they have some employees that they've lost, and their workload is a bit overwhelming. So we're looking at, can we move some of the work between the divisions. So we've identified this problem in the last few weeks. That we knew that we had the problem in January, but it hasn't. We were hoping a few of these projects were going to come in the second half of the year. We now don't think they're going to, or if they do, it's going to be last minute. So I hope I partly answered the question, but we're looking at all of those things right now, trying to do that analysis and come up with a solution. Some of the work they've done, we think we've talked to Aaron Laurel, our economic development director. He thinks some of that work was really community investment work, so we may use 106, which I'll show you in a second, as a surplus. So we're trying to minimize the impact for the general fund, but I think it would be inappropriate for me to suggest to you that we're not going to need some general fund money. I think it'll be getting some work billed, moving some people to billable work, hopefully something coming in, a little bit of 106, a little bit of general fund, and then reassessing what we do going forward to make sure that, you know, our staffing levels more accurately reflect the amount of billable work we have.
Yeah, I wasn't asking because of that. It's just because that's 25% of the program expenditures is that $730,000. So that's a significant amount of staff time that is not billable to one of the projects. So what are we? That's a significant resource that we are deploying in some way. Now, for some of these projects, a lot of work's been done on them, even if the project didn't get across the line. So that's undoubtedly some of that.
Sure.
But then that should reduce the amount associated. The revenue may come in next year with some of the workload have happened this year.
Sure.
But if we're in this position which we have been many times, there's nothing unique about this period. We can't fully project that. But if we're using general fund resources in order to to make sure to keep our team whole, and they're still working. Right. But so who and how are we deciding what the priorities for, if essentially the general fund is going to buy $500,000 worth of community development time, how are you determining what is the priority for that, for those hours, as though we were the client? So I'm sure I'd be shocked if you had the answer to that in your head. But that's the nature of the question for.
And I will tell you that both in Public Works and in Community Development, one of the things Finance has asked them to do this year, because there's a general fund. They don't like the word subsidy, and it's not accurate. There's a general fund contribution to both of those departments for work that they do that is non-billable for other work. And we've asked them to track that time this year, both departments, so we can really look and say, are they doing more or less than the amount of money that we're allocating, and should we make an adjustment? There have been arguments for a number of years by other people that community development is probably doing more than the allocation we give them. Where my argument back is prove it, and then obviously if we do, we'll bring it to the council and say, look, they're really doing $500,000 worth of what we believe is valuable work, and so we should have a greater allocation.
Yeah, I don't mean at all. I wasn't looking for a smoking gun. I was just saying if at that level order of magnitude, are we saying, okay, the next if we look at it as an opportunity, we have a fantastic community development team, and they have some capacity during 15-16 because of the development climate, then okay, are we going to the next item on our strategic plan that we thought we weren't going to be able to get to because we thought we were going to have this many development projects? It's really thinking about how we're deploying the resource more than are they working hard enough. Yes, they absolutely are. We know that, but making sure that we're thinking about how we're thinking about what our next set of priorities are to use the opportunity. We're going to have to pay, we have to pay either way, but use that opportunity to move some of our priorities forward.
That's actually interesting. Today we're doing exactly that. We were looking at the strategic plan and saying, okay, is there stuff that's not getting done there that we can have that staff do? So we just started that literally this afternoon.
No, I was just going to. You made the point I was going to make, is that it is about what we're finding of value. Right, and making sure we plan for that. I don't say I would. I don't want to say I would say. Get this right. I don't want to say this. Don't do a good job at the counter. Don't work with businesses that are trying to expand. Don't stop working with them. Stop. Because that wouldn't be who we are. But there's a price for that. Yeah. I think that's what we're hearing, and we said this. We've been saying this the last few years. Because we used to have that thing called redevelopment, bring it up, but right, they used to pre-fund these things. This activity, we would bill redevelopment agency for that forward work. We don't have that luxury anymore, and so we need to plan for it.
And that's why some of it may be 106 if it's appropriate, that it really is true community investment, if you see that investment.
Yeah, and I'm just going to be hawkish about making sure it is going towards the activity that we said. Sure. I know you're going to get there.
Yeah. Okay, so community development next. Again, just wanted to, I think I mentioned this just a second ago, but 106 is doing well. A lot of, as you know, this is the old redevelopment money, the 50% that the voters voted to go into the community investment fund, and that area has seen a lot of our development that we've actually had has been in that area. So we're 1.2 million above projections, so that's a positive for us. Gasoline, we're all benefiting when we drive around, and our gas bills are low, but we're going to be $421,000 below our gas tax projection because of that. And then, as I mentioned earlier, the traffic and the park, these are just examples, but traffic and park improvement and any of those that are development oriented, we are literally at the lowest numbers we have seen since I've been a staff member here in 9 years. I think our park improvement fund got 103,000, if I'm correct.
Yes.
And traffic improvement was 36 or 32. I mean, it's so we obviously, that's going to cause some challenges that we're going to have to look at. So just next steps, and I'll get out of the way here. Again, the budget workshop will be May 18th. Then we'll hopefully come back to the council on June 1st for adoption. That gives us one extra meeting if we don't. So we're trying to give ourselves room so the council is not, caught in a box at all. Other key issues tonight, after my presentation, there will be a presentation on one of the strategic plan initiatives, the public and open space. We're looking to get some money and ask the council to allocate some of the strategic plan money we have in the budget for that strategic plan initiative item to do some cleanup between now and June 30, so we can keep the momentum going on our Services First program, and that will be presented right after this. On April 20th, we've been working extremely hard with the flood staff on the Southport project. As you know, it's a huge project, biggest capital project we've ever done in the city. And so as the finance director, I'm very nervous about cash flow. So I'm working once a week with our flood staff. We're going to come to you on April 20th with a basic overview of how we think we're going to be able to pay for that project. One of the items asking the council is to use some Measure B pay-go money. Council has authorized when we go to bond up to 10 million, but we have pay-go money that's sitting there that we see some cash flow issues right here in April, May, June, that we need a little bit of money, that the pay-go money could solve that problem in the short run. We are in the process with flood working on a line of credit, but we won't have that probably until July. And as you know, we can't end the year in a deficit. And so this way, hopefully the pay-go money. So we'll have a plan to show you how we're going to pay for that, because we've been working hard on making sure we're comfortable with that plan. And some of it requires council approval, and then we'll go to the flood board the next day to see if they're willing to accept the money. I don't think it will be a problem. And then on the 18th, just the items we'll be bringing to you, besides just the general budget, is we will have the Early Learning Services financial plan. They've been working hard on with Justine Jimenez and Cindy Tuttle and Carol Richardson. They've been working on putting together the plan, so we'll have a plan on that. It could be asking for some general fund money, but they're still in the process of fine-tuning the plan. Obviously, we talked about community development and appreciate the council's direction on some of these areas. We will continue to try to develop how we're going to solve that problem, both short-term and as we go forward. There will be some discussion about the use of Measure K. We have some excess Measure K money, so we'll come back with some proposals to the council, obviously for approval of how we would use that. And then finally, we have, as you know, the staff put, at council's direction, the last budget had about $705,000 in strategic plan initiative money. We committed about 200, and I'm going to get my glasses so I can remember what it was. We committed about 247 so far over the 2-year budget. We're asking for 25 in this next item. So we have about $450,000 uncommitted, and we believe in the next 2-year budget there's a number of items on the strategic plan that we don't have funding for, so we'll be asking the council if it's okay to use some of that strategic plan money for those items, and obviously get direction at that time. So we're hoping that giving you this report a month ahead of the workshop will make the workshop more efficient. That's the goal. If not, let us know. We're just trying to do it better every time. That's my presentation. I'm glad to answer any questions.
All right, thank you. Are there questions at this time?
Yeah, I do. Phil, the in lieu of fee and Measure V funds, as far as the levy is concerned, do you have a presentation that you're going to bring to West Safka for those issues? Because it has been contentious.
So on the 21st at the flood board, after we come to the council, we will have the same presentation for the flood board on how, the plan for funding the Southport project. It's a multifaceted plan. It includes flood bonding, Measure B bonding, use of Measure B pay-go, potentially, the line of credit. At this point, we're not anticipating using the in lieu because it's a small amount that's in there, and we have a solution without using it. So that's what we will present, is the solution without using it. If they ask, my answer to Fillmore would be, it's city money and we don't need it right now, and we haven't asked the council to do anything at this point.
Okay. Mr. Johannesson?
Yeah. For me, on the road fund, we've had some damage over the years on the state of our roads, and how we're trying to maintain that. And this problem with a reduction of fees because of less use of gas is just going to persist. Is the city involved with the conversations on alternates that they're looking at the state to see how that would fit into our budgets?
I know that John Robinson, who's our legislative lead, is looking at all of the legislation going on, and we're supposed to have a report next week, an executive team to look at those and decide which bills we want to get involved in. And certainly, if there's, I know Denix will be supporting us getting involved in anything that'll help get money for roads.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't actually seen, personally, I don't know what's out there. I know there's a lot of discussion. It seems like it's fairly contentious at the Capitol, just like it is everywhere. But we are, we know that's an issue, and we're, in fact, you will see an item at the next council meeting where we're going to be asking for use of a little bit of money to fix one of our roads. It'll be coming up on April 20th.
All right, well, thanks.
So just to follow, so the staff report says that you expect that the state legislation about reallocating road rehab funds will offset the lost revenue. Is there more detail about?
I'm sorry. Let me look.
In the road fund item, it says staff believes that the current legislation related to the allocation of road rehabilitation funds will offset this lost revenue. So I'm just following on.
Yeah, that's what it says. Dishu, can you answer that with any more detail?
This is something that's brought up at the Society of Finance Officers meeting that is currently, Michael Coleman brought it up, and I think Dennis has also brought it up, that there's some current legislation going on.
So it was a fairly broad comment, a broad stroke.
Society is quite optimistic.
Yes, we're very optimistic.
Okay. All right, we do have one request for public comment on this item. It's by Donna Springer.
Mayor and council, thank you for giving us a few minutes. Be kind to me with my 3 minutes. An hour ago, I talked faster. Anyway, by way of introduction, my name is Donna Springer. I'm co-owner of a same-day delivery service called Go Getters here in West Sacramento. We're a woman-owned business, and we have been in business for 31 years. We are located on Sutter Avenue. And because I only have 3 minutes, a picture is worth 1,000 words. Sutter Avenue is located less than 1/2 mile from the intersection of Harbor and West Capitol. I'm not showing you a beat-up street out past the port. This is 1/2 mile from a major intersection. We have been on the street on Sutter, was originally a residential street. It was rezoned to commercial use about 25 years ago. My business partner and I bought our lot and brought our business there. We have been on Sutter for 25 years. In talking to the other businesses, we are the longest business there. They're a couple, 12 years, 16 years, that kind of thing. The condition of the street is deplorable. I could bore you to death with all the pothole stories, but what's the point? It's really bad. Over the years, we have called, especially the last 5, we've called, what can we do? We've been told repeatedly, there is no money to fix the street. We've been told that in various degrees of, frankly, rudeness, until about 3 weeks ago, I came to City Hall, and Phil was kind enough to see me without an appointment, and he was truly professional and a gentleman, and really listened to what I had to say. Why did I finally stop at City Hall? Why? Since January, I don't want to talk to you about bad tire front end, Since January, I've had 2 business associates ask, please, I don't want to come to your office anymore. My accountant of 30 years who does business in West Sacramento asked, I don't want to come to your office anymore. I've had 2 future employees, one a part-time office person, offered the position, she passed. I don't want to drive down that street to come to work. I've had offered 1 full-time driving position to a new applicant. He said, you know, I think I'm going to have to pass. I don't want to take my car down there anymore. So I'm past a bad tire. Now my business is starting to be impacted. That's a different conversation. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This is actually the issue I raised earlier. We have a proposal for the council to do at least what we think is a 1 to 2 year fix, and we'll be bringing that to the council on April 20th.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Yeah, the $30,000 in the road fund is insufficient to rehab more than a couple feet of, not even a couple feet of a road. It's not even enough to put a bid out.
We have another source. We have a source. We'll bring it to you on the 20th.
Okay. All right. So. All right.
Okay.
All right. Other comments on this item? All right then. This is for background only. No, I don't think any additional direction is needed. Got some during the discussion. All right, that brings us then to item 15, which is consideration of approval of a pre-qualified on-call list of contractors to provide open space cleanup services.
Hi, good evening, Mayor Cabal and members of the council. Cindy Tuttle, Director of Parks and Recreation. The item before you is to seek approval of an on-call list of contractors for open space cleanup services and to authorize the use of $25,000 from the Strategic Plan Initiative funding as was outlined by Mr. Wright just in the previous item for those cleanup services through the end of this fiscal year. As you know, the public and open space cleanup program is a top priority on the council's 2016 action agenda. And more importantly, it represents a multi-departmental collaboration that includes the police, fire, and finance departments in addition to Parks and Recreation. Our main concentration over the next few months centers on fire prevention and environmental protection of public lands, including lifting trees, removal of debris, and weed abatement for fire prevention. Approval of the on-call list will streamline the process in order to get that work done, and of course authorization of the funding will allow the cleanup activities on public lands to continue through the end of this fiscal year, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Questions? Any discussion? Motion?
Second.
It's been moved by Mayor Pro Tem Sandin and seconded by Mr. Ledesma. Seeing no further discussion, all those in favor please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Hearing none, that motion carries. Thank you. Council calendar.
I don't know what's microphone, so I'll try to speak up. Good evening, Mayor and council members. Just a couple of dates that might be of interest to you coming up. This Friday at Fire Station 45 is the fire apparatus dedication ceremony at 10 a.m. And the next week is the Sacramento Metro Chamber's annual Cap trip, and I believe that Mayor Pro Tem Sandin and the projection manager Greg David and Deputy City Manager Jeff Robinson are all attending. That's from April 9th to the 13th. Then coming up on April 24th in the Galleria, that's this Sunday at 3 p.m. is the first Youth Fire Academy class graduation ceremony. And finally, on April 27th is the YOLO Leaders Meeting in the Galleria at 4 p.m. So we're hosting that, and the topic is Families in Poverty. And the format will include TED-style lightning talks about addressing poverty in families with school-aged children. So hopefully we'll all attend that. Thank you very much.
Any questions on the calendar? All right, thank you. City Manager report.
Well, in anticipation of the microphone not working, I have a summary of some upcoming issues. I did want to highlight that Provision Brewery was in the Business Journal yesterday in terms of their decision to cite a brewery on the Highway from Will County, beside Business part. Rubicon is also in construction on Eastern Avenue, so we have two breweries in that part of town. I also wanted to highlight the waste management contract. It's going to go to the Environment and Utilities Commission on the 11th, back for April.
Any questions on the city manager report? City attorney report? Any staff director from members of the council? We have no future agenda requests, so is there a motion to adjourn? Moved by Mr. Zadazman, second by Mr. Tim Santini. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. Meeting is adjourned.